So I want to talk about my nieces. So most of y'all are my family anyway, so y'all have met my nieces, but I have a 4-year-old niece and a 7-year-old niece, and they are as cute as a button. I love them to death, and every time I hang out with them, it reminds me of how cool kids are and how like wonderful kids, especially little kids are. Their minds are full of wonder and everything from how small little things are to how amazing those little things are. It drives me, like, it amazes me to them having energy, a whole bunch of energy 1 second and then can crash the next second. Their minds are just awesome. One of my favorite things that my nieces do, especially my nieces. My nieces are pretty smart, I like to say, because my sister is probably watching, and I can't call her kids dumb. So one of my favorite thing about little kids is their drive, their will to do a task over and over again, even though they fail. Right? I've seen my nieces sit there and try to do the littlest thing for about 20 to 30 minutes and keep on messing up and messing up and messing up, but they never stop. I know that if I try something for 30 minutes, I probably give up and throw something at it and then call it good, right? But they just keep trying and trying and trying. They might get mad and they might throw a fit, but then they'll come back and try it again, you know? And I think that's so cool that little kids do that. But during when they're doing this for a long period of time, you can start seeing the wheels turning in their head a little bit and the smoke's coming from their ears because they're actually using their brains. You can actually see their brains working and figuring out the answer to the problem that they're dealing with. Then eventually they do what they've been trying to do. Also like how observant they are. Have you ever seen a kid try to do something and their parents do it to show them how to do it? Like, I can't even think of something. My nieces always like struggle to find the simplest things that are like right in front of them, right? So like they'll be like, "Mom, I need a napkin," and then the mom's like, "Hey, the napkins are right in front of you. Just go grab them." And they're like, "Where?" And it's like right here, you know? And then their mom's like, "Here's a napkin." And then they put it back and then they just sit down. I like how smart parents can be. Because they just like grab a napkin and they can easily hand it to their kid. And then they just don't and they put it back. And they're like, "You grab it now," you know? But they're so observant of little things that their parents do until they pick up on it. And I think that's really cool too. Professional athletes do this sometimes too. They watch film over their own plays. I've seen defensive players for football. They watch their hips. Cornerbacks, they back up with the wide receivers, and then when they turn with the wide receivers, if you turn your hips the wrong way, then you lose balance. They watch everything they do to the littlest step, and they'll spend days on it just watching themselves. They learn from their mistakes, whether it's the smallest mistakes, whether it's they give up the biggest touchdown of the game. They watch everything they do. So I got to thinking, wouldn't it be nice if we could go back and watch every little mistake that we do so we can learn from it? And then I started thinking again, we have a whole book of people just messing up in their lives. It might not be exactly our mistake. Have y'all seen the progressive commercials where it's like two guys are talking about, like, two roommates are talking about letting a cat in. And he's like, I didn't leave the door open. And it's like, it had to be you. And they're like, okay, let's watch the replay. And then they watch the replay, and they find out one actually let the cat in. I just think that's so cool. So the Bible is a whole bunch of people that messed up in their lives. It might not be exactly our mistakes, but it's close enough. We've all dealt with the same things they've dealt with. Let's look at some of the things that people messed up, and let's learn from their mistakes. I have a couple of stories that I want to read from, and it's kind of weird for me because I don't really read a lot from the Old Testament, so give me some grace on it, okay? I want to talk about the wall of Jericho. So in Joshua 6, we're going to be in Joshua 6. I'm going to give y'all a little brief, really brief thing of what God tells Joshua to do, and then we'll get into it. So God tells Joshua to get his army together and start walking around the wall of Jericho for 6 days, once a day for 6 days. And then he tells all the priests that are with him to grab ram's horns and follow them, or lead them, I think it was. And then on the seventh day, he tells them to walk around the wall 7 times. The priest blows the horn, and then the army yells, and the wall comes down. Right? So it's kind of the thing that a whole bunch of people know about the story. But we're going to be in Joshua 6:15. Joshua 6:15 says, on the 7th day, the Israelites got up at dawn and marched around the town. Sorry, I am so dyslexic I can jump from line to line. Marched around the town as they have done before, but this time they went around the town 7 times. The 7th time around, the priests sounded in the long blast of their horns. Joshua commanded the people, shout, for the Lord has given you the town. Jericho and everything in it must be completely destroyed as an offering to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and the others in her house will be spared, for she has protected our spies. I'm so sorry. Do not take any of the things set apart for destruction, or you yourself will be completely destroyed, and you will bring trouble to the camp of Israel. Everything made from silver, gold, bronze, and iron is sacred to the Lord and must be brought into the treasury. When the people heard the sounds of the ram's horn, they shouted as loud as they could. Suddenly the walls of Jericho collapsed, and the Israelites charged straight into the town and captured it. So I'm not going to talk about Joshua and his army in this point. I want to talk about Jericho, the city of Jericho. See, Joshua and his army did exactly what God told them, to the word. He told them exactly how many motions to go around the wall. How many times to blow the horn? How many times? When do you yell? All this. They followed it to the T. But I wanted to talk about Jericho. So think about it. The only reason you would build a wall around a city or a town is because you're scared. It's because you've probably been attacked before by another army or another city or another town, another village, whatever it is. The only reason why you would set up a wall around it is because you've been attacked before and you're scared to be attacked again. We do the same thing as people. We've been hurt before, whether it's I broke up with my boyfriend, I broke up with my girlfriend, my best friend hurt my feelings. We've been hurt by people in our lives. And then what do we do after that? We build a wall around our hearts. When we build a wall around our hearts, it's because we're scared to be hurt again. We were hurt before, and we don't want to be hurt again. And then after we have the walls up for a long period of time, the stuff on the inside of the wall becomes dark, and it becomes cold. It becomes attached from the world because it forgets what the world is like. It becomes isolated. The devil works in isolation, right? That's exactly what Jericho did. They didn't want anyone to attack them. They became isolated to the world. We do that. That's how our hearts are when we get hurt. But I like how our hearts are exactly like the walls of Jericho, because the only way that they tore down the walls of Jericho is the same way that our hearts, the walls of our hearts, can be torn down. God and God's people are the only way that the walls of our hearts come down. I remember being hurt in my high school days and my beginning of walking with God. And I remember being hurt, and I remember putting walls up around my heart. I didn't want anyone to hurt them. I like to talk, and I like to talk a lot. And I talk to everyone I can. But at that time, there's a difference between talking about yourself and then talking about nothing. You know what I mean? I never actually opened up to anyone at that time. I was hurt. I was scared of somebody hurting me again. Until my life group leader came into my life. And he made it okay to talk to somebody again. God came into my heart. He tore down the walls. And he cleaned everything out. Just like the Israelites did. They destroyed everything. They tore down the walls and started from scratch. That's exactly what God and his people do to our hearts. When God tears down your walls and cleans house, only then you're open back up to the world. You actually see what's going on around you. You actually feel for the people that are hurt in Africa, that are starving, the people that are affected by earthquakes and war. Only then you actually feel for other people. I want to talk about another story. And these are both like kids' story that I grew up on, but now that I'm older, God actually opened my eyes to a lot of things. So the second story I want to talk about is about three guys named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or as my buddy calls them, cataract, kneecap, and a billy goat. So let's go to Daniel 3:16. And then we're going to be in verse 16, right? So it says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God who we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power and your majesty. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you set up. So before I keep on going, the whole point about this, and I didn't read it, is that Nebuchadnezzar was the king. They served under Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar served other gods and built a statue and demanded everyone on his staff and everyone that he was commanding to serve and bow down to this golden statue. These three men wouldn't, and he got really mad about it. So let's continue. Nebuchadnezzar was so furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that his face became distorted with rage. He commanded that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than usual. Then he ordered some of the strongest men in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and then throw them into the blazing furnace. So they tied them up, threw them into the furnace, fully dressed in their pants, turbans, robes, and other garments. And because he was king, in his anger, he demanded that the hot fire in the furnace, or he demanded such a hot fire in the furnace that the flames killed the soldiers that threw the 3 men in. So Meshach and Abednego, securely tied, fell into the roaring flames. But suddenly Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in amazement and exclaimed to his advisors, didn't we tie up 3 men and throw them into the furnace? Yes, your majesty, we certainly did, they replied. Look, Nebuchadnezzar shouted, I see 4 men unbound walking in the fires unharmed, and the 4th looks like a god. The Nebuchadnezzar came as close as he could to the door of the flaming furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. So when they came out of the fire, I'm not going to read all the way. When they came out of the fire, the binds that held them was burnt off, and Nebuchadnezzar turned towards God, which is a beautiful sight. But the cool thing about this is that these men were just average, plain Jane, blue-collared workers. There was nothing special about them. They get thrown into a furnace because they didn't serve Nebuchadnezzar's God. So when I read this, I put Nebuchadnezzar and I put him like he's the guy that idols the world. He idols money, he idols possessions of the world. So I called Nebuchadnezzar the world, right? I just put him in that mindset. Like if I'm in that mindset, Nebuchadnezzar is the world, right? The thing is the world throws a whole bunch of crap at us, right? A whole bunch of stuff at us. We either get thrown into stuff that we really don't want to be in, or there's stuff thrown into our lives that we really don't want to be in. You know what I mean? And the thing is a lot of stuff that happens to us is because we believe in God. God tells us, or Jesus told the disciples, that the world's going to hate you because you love me. The world hated me first. A lot of bad stuff that happens to us, I'm not saying God does it, but I'm saying it's because we love God and the devil knows that. So if Nebuchadnezzar is the world, and he throws a whole bunch of stuff at us, fire at us, then, and it's only because we love God. And I put stuff thrown at us, as in like us being poor, or starving, or diseased, or illness, or death. These are stuff that's thrown at us that we don't really like, right? But the thing is about all those things is God will stand toe-to-toe with us as we walk through those things. What's really cool about these 3 plain Jane blue-collared workers that had nothing really special about them is that even though the world turned against them and they were going to be thrown into a fire, God walked through the fire with them. Just like how he stood with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, he stands with us when we go through the fire. And the thing is it would have been easy for them to turn away from God. It could have been easy for them to go, hey, I don't want to be burned alive. I can just bow to this God this one time, you know? It wouldn't hurt. And if they did that, then this story wouldn't happen. Then I wouldn't be standing here talking about this story. This wouldn't be one of the most famous stories in the Bible. The thing is we like being comfortable. Christians these days like to be comfortable where they're at. We like to avoid conflict when it's presented to us. And we're okay with it. But these three guys are famous because they weren't okay with it. They weren't okay with bowing down to another god. They weren't okay with bowing down to the world. But the cool thing is because their faith with God, they could have died, but God was with them through the whole thing. And I was just thinking about the people that we have to go save, the people of Grape Creek. They're the people that are going through the fire as well. I think a fireman, you never see a fireman go away from the fire. You always see firemen run into the fire. We're supposed to be the firemen. We're supposed to be the guys that are running into the fire and being with the people that are going through the fire. Just like God was with these three men that weren't special, we're supposed to be with the people that aren't special. We're supposed to put our bodies on the line. We're supposed to throw ourselves in the fire. Because that's where the people that need God are. I like the saying that church isn't for the healthy, that it's a hospital for the sick. It's the same thing with fire. It's the same thing that firemen do. You're not going to save people that are outside of the fire. You have to save the people that are in the fire.